Claire woke to the sound of rain whispering against her window, a small sound that somehow made her whole life feel heavier, as if the sky itself understood her trouble. She sat in her cramped Seattle apartment staring at the email that changed everything. Her position was cut effective immediately. No warning, no transition period, just a simple message that her job, the one she counted on to survive in the city, was gone. Her rent was due in 3 days, her savings nearly empty, and her confidence slipping fast. She tried not to panic, but her mind raced with questions she had no answers to. She had always been the steady one, the woman who kept bills, paid meals, planned and life organized, but now she felt like the floor had been pulled out from under her. Her apartment, usually her safe place, suddenly felt too quiet and too small. Claire kept thinking of her landlord, Ethan Hale, a man who carried himself with calm warmth. Someone who had always treated her with respect rather than the cold business attitude she expected from most landlords. He had a way of asking how she was doing that felt genuine, a way of remembering small details that made people feel valued. She hated the idea of disappointing him or appearing irresponsible, even though she knew none of this was her fault. Still, the thought of telling him she wouldn't be able to pay rent made her stomach twist. She tried to come up with solutions, selling her bike, picking up gig work, borrowing from friends, but nothing added up fast enough. It was like trying to stop a river with her hands. After hours of pacing and overthinking, she finally sent him a message. "Hi, Ethan, could we talk when you have a moment?" She didn't explain why. She couldn't bring herself to. She felt embarrassed, small, uncertain. She checked her phone every few minutes, hoping he wouldn't respond with disappointment or irritation. Instead, he replied quickly, saying he'd stop by in the evening. Simple words, but somehow calming. Evening arrived faster than she expected, the sky dimming into soft gray, the rain steady. She kept telling herself to stay composed, to explain everything clearly, to not fall apart in front of him. But when the knock at her door finally came, her heart leaped with nerves. She took a deep breath, forced her hands to stop shaking, and opened the door only to find not just Ethan standing there, but to people behind him, his friends, to complete strangers. Suddenly, everything she rehearsed in her mind disappeared. Ethan stood tall, rain-damp hair slightly pushed back, wearing the same gentle expression he always had, but seeing him with guests made her confusion spike. Why would he bring friends? Was this about her message? Was this for support or something? Far more serious. She felt a wave of embarrassment hit as she realized her apartment was cluttered with job rejection notes, half-written cover letters, and the untouched cup of coffee she'd made hours earlier. Ethan offered a soft smile, a kind smile, as if he could sense her fear before she even spoke, but Claire's thoughts moved too fast to settle. She wondered if he had misunderstood her message or if he assumed her request to talk meant something urgent that required other people's involvement. She felt exposed, like her private struggle had suddenly become public. Mark, a friendly-looking man with warm eyes, stood behind Ethan while Lily, a woman with calm energy and a gentle smile, held a small box that looked like food. The whole scene felt unusual and unexpected, but none of them looked annoyed or judgmental. They looked concerned. They looked caring. Claire's breath caught as her mind tried to process the situation. She had reached out to a landlord expecting a difficult conversation about overdue payments, not a doorstep full of sympathetic strangers. She didn't know if she should apologize, explain, or simply close the door and hide. But Ethan stepped forward slightly, not imposing, just reassuring, and said her name in a soft voice that made her heart slow down for a moment. It was the tone people used when they didn't want you to feel alone. She didn't know why he brought friends, not yet, and she didn't know what he was going to say. But the moment felt like the beginning of something she couldn't define. Something that would change everything far more than unpaid rent ever could. Claire stood frozen for a moment, her eyes flicking between Ethan and the two strangers behind him. Mark and Lily trying to make sense of the unusual scene in her small apartment. The rain outside created a soft rhythm, a quiet backdrop to the chaos of her thoughts. She had expected a tense conversation about rent, maybe some disappointment. But this felt entirely different, almost like stepping into a scene she hadn't rehearsed for. Ethan's calm presence was grounding, but seeing him with companions, sharing concern instead of judgment, made her pulse quicken in ways she couldn't immediately understand. He offered a gentle smile, the kind that seemed to say, "You're safe here, even if everything else feels like it's falling apart." Then Mark stepped forward, his brown eyes warm, open, and completely free of any expectation. "We're not here to pressure you," he said, his voice casual but kind, like he was delivering a truth meant to ease her panic. "Ethan told us what you're going through, and we thought maybe we could help." Claire blinked, confusion mingling with disbelief. Help. Strangers showing up to help her. She hadn't expected anyone to step into her struggle, let alone her landlord bringing friends to do it. Ethan gave her a reassuring nod, and for the first time all day, she felt a small thread of relief weave through her anxiety. Lily, carrying a small box, smiled softly and said, "I figured you might not have the energy to cook tonight, so we brought dinner. Nothing fancy, but something to keep you going." The gesture, simple as it was, made Claire's chest tighten. No one had done this for her in months. No one had noticed how quietly she was struggling, how much pressure she was carrying alone. She felt a wave of gratitude that mingled with embarrassment, a hot, uncomfortable mix that made her cheeks flush. She tried to thank them, but the words caught in her throat. Ethan, sensing her hesitation, stepped a little closer. "Claire, I didn't want you to feel cornered or ashamed," he said softly. "We just want to make sure you're okay." That simple declaration felt heavier than any reprimand could have. Claire had been trying to maintain control of her life, to hold herself together, but the sudden presence of kindness, concern, and understanding made her feel exposed in the best possible way. They settled around her tiny kitchen table, eating simple food and talking lightly at first, filling the space with casual conversation to ease the tension. Mark asked about her weekend plans. Lily commented on the persistent Seattle drizzle. And Ethan, quietly present, asked about her writing projects, showing a genuine interest that warmed her more than she expected. For the first time in days, Claire laughed, soft and uncertain at first, then a little more freely as the conversation moved forward. The room began to feel lighter, less like a trap of anxiety and more like a space of connection. Yet underneath the casual chatter, there was a silent question hanging between her and Ethan. Something neither had said aloud, but both were aware of, a tension of feelings unspoken. A potential for something beyond the ordinary tenant-landlord relationship. Claire couldn't name it yet. But every glance Ethan cast in her direction seemed charged with meaning she hadn't allowed herself to feel before. She tried to push the thought away, reminding herself she had enough to worry about without complicating matters with emotions she didn't understand. Still, the gentle attentiveness in Ethan's actions, the soft encouragement from his friends, stirred something deep inside her, a fluttering sense of possibility that made her heart race against her will. As they ate, the rain outside intensified, pattering against the windows like a soundtrack to the quiet intimacy forming in her small apartment. Every laugh, every gentle word felt amplified, drawing her further into a moment she hadn't expected to experience in the middle of such a stressful night. She realized she hadn't felt this cared for in a long time. Perhaps not since her family had last gathered for holidays, before life had scattered her into independence and struggle. There was something grounding in the presence of these people, something that reminded her that even in her lowest moments, human connection could still break through, unexpected and restorative. Mark and Lily, sensing the undercurrent of tension and emotion, gave her space but stayed nearby, their presence reassuring without being intrusive. Ethan, however, remained quietly focused on her, his expression soft, almost tender. And Claire couldn't stop herself from noticing the way he seemed to measure every word, every gesture, to make sure she felt supported without being overwhelmed. She realized she was holding her breath, caught between gratitude and curiosity, wondering why he cared so much, why he had brought others into this moment, and what it really meant. Her mind raced with possibilities, each one more improbable than the last, yet she couldn't deny the warmth spreading through her chest. A fragile hope she hadn't allowed herself in months. As the meal wound down, Ethan leaned back slightly, studying her with a careful, serious gaze, as if weighing whether the next words would be too much or exactly what she needed to hear. Claire felt a shiver of anticipation, unsure whether to brace herself or surrender to the unexpected comfort of this night. Then Ethan's voice, quiet but firm, broke the soft lull of conversation. "Claire, I need to tell you why I really came tonight," he said, and the air shifted instantly. The casual, friendly atmosphere gave way to a charged, intimate tension that made her heart pound in her chest. She leaned forward slightly, her curiosity overcoming her caution, ready to hear what he had to say, even though she didn't yet know if she could handle it. The room felt smaller, warmer, and full of potential, as if the rain outside had pushed them all into a bubble where nothing else existed except the truth that was about to be shared. Claire's stomach twisted, part nervousness, part anticipation, and she realized she was holding her breath once again, waiting for the moment that could change everything she had thought about Ethan, about herself, and about the fragile, tentative threads of connection forming around her in this unexpected evening. The soft light of the apartment, the muted sound of rain, the presence of 3 people who had shown up when she needed help most, combined to make her realize that life, even in its harshest moments, could still surprise her, still offer moments of tenderness, hope, and unspoken possibilities that she had almost forgotten existed. And in that instant, with Ethan's eyes holding hers and his words hanging in the air, Claire knew that whatever happened next could shift the course of her life in ways she had never imagined. Ethan's friends, Mark and Lily, quietly stepped out into the hallway, giving the small apartment a sudden sense of privacy that made Claire's heart beat faster, her stomach twisting with nerves and anticipation. The rain continued to fall outside, tapping against the windows in a steady rhythm, almost like a countdown to something important. Claire sat at her tiny kitchen table, feeling exposed yet strangely safe, unsure of what Ethan was about to say, but knowing it mattered more than any rent conversation could. He remained standing at first, his hands in his pockets, shoulders slightly tense, eyes fixed on hers with a mixture of hesitation and sincerity that made her chest tighten. He finally pulled a chair close and sat down opposite her, his presence overwhelming yet comforting, as if the world outside had disappeared and only the two of them existed in that quiet, rain-lit room. "Claire," he began, his voice low, "careful, I'm not here to lecture you or make you feel guilty. I know how hard life can get, and I know this month has been rough for you." Her throat tightened at the gentle truth of his words, and she realized she had been holding her breath, afraid of judgment, but now felt a cautious relief. She nodded slightly, unsure how to respond, caught between embarrassment and a strange flutter of hope. Ethan continued, leaning slightly forward, his hands clasped together on the table, fingers intertwined, showing both control and vulnerability at the same time. "I brought my friends tonight because I've been holding back something I shouldn't have, but I couldn't ignore it anymore. I didn't want you to face this alone, not when I know how strong you are, but also how much weight you've been carrying." Claire's eyes widened as she tried to process his words, confusion mixing with curiosity, wondering what he meant and why he was suddenly so personal, so open. She had always known Ethan as a calm, polite, attentive landlord, but this felt like the unveiling of something deeper, something that had been quietly building between them without either acknowledging it. She felt her heart race, warmth creeping into her chest, a feeling she hadn't let herself experience for months, maybe years, as loneliness and stress had been her constant companions. Ethan paused, then finally spoke the words that made her stomach flip. "Claire, I care about you. More than I expected to, more than I should, given our situation. But I can't pretend I don't. I didn't want to make things complicated. But I also can't let you struggle in silence, not when I want to be here for you." The honesty in his voice, the gentle but unwavering intensity in his eyes, made Claire's chest ache. She wasn't used to people saying such things, to offering themselves emotionally without any pretense or expectation. She felt a lump form in her throat, the beginnings of tears threatening to spill, not from sadness, but from relief, hope, and something she wasn't ready to name. Her mind raced. What did this mean? Was he confessing feelings, offering friendship, or simply showing compassion? But she couldn't deny the subtle pull in her chest, the fluttering warmth every time his gaze lingered on her. The unspoken connection that seemed to hum in the quiet space between them. Ethan's words continued, soft but earnest. "I didn't want to make you uncomfortable. I know I'm your landlord, and this shouldn't matter, but it does. You matter. And I don't want to lose the chance to be part of your life in whatever way you'll let me." Claire's breath caught, the weight of what he was saying pressing down on her heart. She wanted to speak, to explain, to somehow respond, but the words refused to form. Tangled in emotion, fear, and the faint stirring of longing she couldn't yet define. For a moment, they simply looked at each other, the rain outside filling the silence, a quiet music accompanying the tense intimacy of the room. Claire felt her pulse quicken, and the warmth spreading through her chest made the air between them feel electric. She realized she had never felt so simultaneously safe and exposed, the fear of embarrassment eclipsed by the vulnerability of connection. Ethan leaned slightly closer, not invasive, but enough that she could feel the subtle shift in the room, the closeness that made her heart flutter and her thoughts scatter. "Claire," he said again, quieter now, almost a whisper, "I don't want you to think I'm overstepping. Just, I can't ignore what I feel. And I wanted you to know, no matter what happens with the rent or your job, no matter how hard things get, you're not alone. Not with me and not with them either." His hand brushed lightly against the edge of the table, so close to hers that she felt the warmth radiating from him, a physical echo of his words. She blinked rapidly, trying to process, trying to ground herself, realizing that her life had shifted in a single evening in ways she couldn't have predicted. Ethan's eyes softened, watching her for a response, patient, understanding, giving her the space to absorb the unexpected truth of his confession. "Why? Why would you do this for me?" She finally whispered, her voice barely audible over the rain. Ethan hesitated, a faint smile tugging at his lips, the kind that made her feel seen and cherished in a way no one had in years. "Because," he said slowly, deliberately, "losing you from my life would hurt far more than losing a month of rent." The words landed like a gentle shock, and Claire felt her breath catch, tears pricking her eyes as the full weight of his sincerity and care sank in. She realized she was trembling, not from fear, but from the sudden recognition that someone truly understood her, cared for her, and wanted to stand by her through her struggles. Before she could respond, there was a soft knock at the door, and Mark and Lily returned, faces gentle but serious. Claire felt a flicker of curiosity mixed with apprehension as Lily stepped forward, holding out Claire's phone. "You need to see this," she said softly, her tone carrying a gravity that made Claire's chest tighten. Claire took the phone, with shaking hands, anticipation buzzing through her like electricity. The screen was lit with an incoming call from an unknown number. Ethan's gaze remained on her, attentive, steady, patient, giving her the courage to answer, even though her heart was racing a mile a minute. She pressed the screen and whispered, "Hello." The voice on the other end was calm, professional, but with a hint of excitement. "Hi, Claire. Calling from the publishing company you applied to last month. We reviewed your portfolio and we're very interested in speaking with you further. Could we schedule a time to talk? Claire felt her chest tighten and her breath catch. She hadn't expected good news tonight. Hadn't expected anything positive to break through the stress and fear that had consumed her. She nodded, unable to hide her trembling excitement, whispering, "Yes, yes, of course." The call ended quickly, but it carried with it a wave of possibility and hope. A chance at something new that seemed almost too good to be true. She looked up at Ethan, Mark, and Lily, feeling a surge of gratitude and wonder. Ethan's expression softened, relief and hope mingling in his eyes as he watched her process the news. Claire realized in that moment that her life had changed not because she had earned it yet, but because someone believed in her, because someone had stepped into her chaos and offered support, connection, and care when she needed it most. She felt a warmth spread through her chest, a combination of relief, admiration, and something deeper. A flutter of emotion she hadn't dared to feel in months. The night outside was still rainy, the city muted under the soft drizzle, but inside, her apartment, hope had begun to bloom, fragile yet undeniable. She had faced the fear of judgment, opened herself to vulnerability, and found that it had not broken her, had given her a chance to experience kindness, connection, and perhaps the beginning of love in its most gentle, unexpected form. As the evening continued, the three friends lingered. Their presence a quiet reassurance, while Claire allowed herself to breathe, to feel, and to imagine the possibilities that lay ahead, knowing that whatever happened next, she had discovered something powerful that even in the hardest moments, human connection could arrive like a sudden light. And that life could still surprise her in the most beautiful ways. Claire felt her hands trembling as she held the phone. The voice on the other end, calm, professional, and surprisingly warm, delivering words she had only dared to hope for in the quiet of her lonely nights. The publishing company had seen her portfolio, they were interested, and they wanted to schedule a follow-up conversation. Her heart pounded as relief and excitement collided, making her feel both elated and vulnerable at the same time. She barely had time to process before she hung up, her chest tight with adrenaline and disbelief. Ethan watched her, his expression unreadable at first, then softening into something tender. A quiet pride and hope shining through the calm mask he usually wore. Mark and Lily smiled knowingly, sensing the significance of the moment, their presence a steady anchor in the whirlwind of emotion that had filled the room for hours. Claire's eyes glistened with tears she barely held back, her lips curved, in a smile that felt foreign yet familiar, a mixture of joy, relief, and anticipation. She realized that the night, which had started with fear and uncertainty, had transformed into something she hadn't expected, a night of revelation, connection, and new beginnings. Ethan took a careful step closer, his gaze unwavering, and Claire felt a flutter in her chest she couldn't ignore. A warmth spreading that made her heart race and her mind spin with possibilities. "Good news?" he asked softly, his voice low, almost hesitant, as if he was afraid to break the fragile magic of the moment. Claire nodded, words caught in her throat, emotions too tangled to untangle quickly. But the smile she gave him said more than words ever could. "They want to meet with me?" she finally whispered, her voice shaking with excitement and disbelief. "I might get the job." Relief, hope, and pride flooded her all at once, and she felt lighter than she had in weeks, almost weightless, as if a burden she hadn't fully acknowledged had been lifted. Ethan exhaled softly, a quiet laugh escaping him, a sound that made the room feel warmer and more intimate. And Claire realized she had never noticed how comforting his presence could be until this moment. She watched as his features softened, the usual restraint in his eyes melting into something open, tender, and human. And she felt a pull she had been trying to ignore since he first showed up on her doorstep that evening. Mark and Lily lingered briefly, their supportive smiles encouraging yet non-intrusive. sensing that this was a moment Claire and Ethan needed to navigate on their own. As they left, closing the door behind them, the room seemed to shrink in a way that made the space between Claire and Ethan more immediate, more intimate. The soft glow of the kitchen light highlighted the subtle expressions on Ethan's face, the warmth in his eyes, the small smile tugging at his lips, the quiet hope he seemed unwilling to hide. Claire, still holding her phone, felt her pulse quicken, aware of the sudden, almost electric tension in the air, a silent energy that suggested unspoken emotions teetering on the edge of revelation. "I don't know what tonight was supposed to be," she said finally, her voice low, "but I'm really glad you were here." Her words were simple, yet they carried a weight that made Ethan's chest tighten in response. A mixture of relief, longing, and something tenderly vulnerable. He stepped closer, the space between them narrowing just enough to make her aware of the heat radiating from him, the subtle intimacy of proximity, and the quiet possibility that lingered like a gentle promise. "Claire," he said, his tone soft, deliberate, "whatever tomorrow brings, you don't have to face it alone." The words wrapped around her like a protective cloak, filling her with a warmth that was both reassuring and thrilling. She realized that for the first time in weeks, maybe months, she felt seen in a way that transcended ordinary friendship, a way that acknowledged her struggle, her strength, and the quiet vulnerability she had been hiding. The night continued. In a gentle rhythm, the rain outside creating a soft, almost cinematic backdrop to the small but powerful connection forming between them. They talked quietly, sharing small details, laughter mingling with the lingering tension of unspoken feelings, each word and glance layering meaning and possibility. Claire noticed how Ethan's presence made her feel calm and exhilarated simultaneously, a paradox she had never experienced before. The world outside seemed distant and unimportant. The storm reduced to a gentle murmur as the warmth of companionship and potential love filled her apartment. She realized how much she had longed for connection, not the shallow kind, but something deep, tender and human. And here it was, standing across the table from her, steady and patient. As the evening drew on, they shared small stories, quiet, confessions and laughter that felt sincere and unforced. Each moment strengthened a fragile bridge between them, a connection built on understanding, care, and mutual recognition. Claire felt her heart expand, hope intertwining with excitement as she imagined what could come next. The possibilities for both her career and her life with someone who had proven that support, understanding, and affection could arrive even in the most unexpected circumstances. Ethan, noticing the subtle shift in her expression, mirrored it, a small smile playing at his lips, eyes soft, reflecting the same cautious hope and emotional vulnerability she felt. They lingered in the shared quiet, a gentle tension of anticipation, an acknowledgement that something significant had begun, something neither had fully named yet, but both understood. Claire realized that the night had not only brought good news about her future career, but it also opened a door to emotional intimacy, to connection, and perhaps love that she had feared lost forever. The warmth in her chest was a mixture of relief, excitement, and a tender awareness of the bond forming between her and Ethan. For the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to imagine a future where challenges could be met together, where support and care were not only offered but freely given, where the loneliness she had carried so heavily could be replaced by partnership and understanding. As the night ended, the rain easing into a soft drizzle, Claire felt a quiet gratitude for the unexpected turns of fate, for Ethan's presence and for the friends who had brought them to this point. She realized that even in moments of uncertainty, struggle, and fear, life had a way of surprising people, offering unexpected opportunities for growth, joy, and connection. The evening closed with laughter, soft conversation, and a lingering sense of hope that neither Claire nor Ethan wanted to break. Each glance, each word carried a weight of possibility, a subtle promise that what had begun tonight could evolve into something meaningful, something rare and precious. Claire leaned back slightly, allowing herself to breathe, to feel, and to imagine the journey ahead with cautious optimism, knowing that the support and care she had received tonight could carry her through the uncertainty of the days to come. Ethan, across from her, mirrored the same openness. A quiet understanding passing between them, a bond forming that promised patience, tenderness, and the slow blossoming of trust and perhaps love. In that moment, Claire realized that the night, which had begun with fear and anxiety, had transformed into a turning point. A story of unexpected kindness, emotional courage, and gentle romance. It had shown her that even when life seemed overwhelming, when doors appeared closed, and when struggles felt insurmountable, there was always the potential for new beginnings, for connection, and for moments that could change everything in the most gentle, profound ways. And as she watched Ethan gather his coat, pausing to give her a lingering look, she understood that this night, this conversation, this shared vulnerability had planted the seed of something lasting, something that could grow alongside the opportunities awaiting her, a quiet but powerful promise that she was not alone, and that the future, uncertain as it might be, could hold not just survival, but joy, love, and the warmth of human connection.